Hello and welcome to the podcast series CAREWELL Conversations, raising awareness about the issues and challenges facing family carers who combine work and care. By engaging with employers, HR professionals, employee representative organisations, family carers and the research community. My name is Brian Doyle. I'm the podcast series producer and a researcher with the CAREWELL project, a collaboration between University College Dublin and Family Carers Ireland, funded by the Health Research Board. The overall aim of the CAREWELL Research Project is to promote health and self-care among working family carers. And over the course of this podcast series, we will have conversations with those who have a role to play in supporting working family carers and begin to tease out the challenges and issues facing them and their employers.
Hey, hi everybody. My name is Catherine Cox and I'm Head of Communications and Policy with Family Carers Ireland. And I'm here today talking to Lizzie Falconer, who is a family carer and also works outside the home. And we're going to ask her a few questions and she's going to tell us what her caring role is all about. So first of all, Lizzie, you're very welcome and thanks for doing this. So can you tell me a little bit about yourself, your son David, and your caring role?
Sure. And first of all, Catherine, thanks so much for inviting me to participate. It's great to be able to share our story and hope that it can help others and also help inform how we work in the future, both as working carers, but also as employers and what we can do to help out families. So my name is Lizzie. We live in County Clare. My husband is Ian, and we care for our son, David. He's 16 years old. He has a very rare skin condition called ichthyosis. And within the ichthyosis family, David has an even more rare strain and one of the more severe forms of it. So I think from a very young age, well, since he was born, he's had the condition, but from a very young age, we have really invested ourselves in trying to bring him up and trying to provide him with every opportunity that we could. We intensively care for his skin, and that involves like daily routine baths, 7 or 8 hours a day of bathing. The house is kept pretty clean, not as clean as I'd like it to be, but pretty clean. He sheds a lot of skin, so that's constantly got to be hoovered up. We try to keep the house infection free, so we use a lot of like Dettol detergents, all that kind of stuff. But I think for David, he has long lived in hope that the condition would get easier and easier, and that's just not been the case. So for a couple of reasons, his strain is called ichthyosis on confetti, and the confetti refers to white spots in the skin, and that's where the epidermal layer has actually auto-corrected itself and corrected the genetic fault within that little spot. So that little spot is actually normal, healthy skin. David would often ask, will there ever be enough spots that it would essentially cure him? And I think as parents, we kind of try not to raise his hopes and we try to keep him grounded as possible, but there is some little hope in him that will happen. So like I said, our caring role involves intensive physical care, cleaning the house, multiple appointments. David's ichthyosis has affected his eyes, his ears, his physical mobility, his speech ability, his fine gross motor skills, the whole lot. So it's constant nonstop appointments. And in addition to that, I guess he is a high maintenance child, not by his own desire, but just by default of the condition. So there's lots going on, and we couple all that with work for both myself and Ian now.
Very good. And before COVID ever came to our shores, what would you say were maybe the 3 biggest challenges you faced as a family carer, trying to juggle paid work with care in the home?
Yeah, so before COVID came, I guess I was actually out of work ill. I had cancer at the time. So I'm going to skip back a couple of years even before that. So before COVID came, I think that the biggest challenges for us were access to respite. Like there is no time off from ichthyosis, no different than many of the other conditions. But, Christmas Day, David's routine still has to be done. We can't we can't do anything. Myself and Ian can't do anything by ourselves for the most part, because we're always on like a 4-hour cycle with David. So where do we need to be? What needs to happen, etc. So I think access to respite for David and access to respite for ourselves. We're an extremely tight unit, and that's wonderful. But with that extreme tight unit also comes an element of frustration and an element of closeness. And of course, when you're angry, you take it out on the people who are close to you, right? So I think breaking us up as a unit wouldn't be a bad thing some of the times. Access to general services for David. We've gone to the point where we haven't had physiotherapy, occupational therapy appointments for years now. We are also at the stage where I think at one point we waited over 18 months for a pair of orthotic insoles for David. Those kind of delays are just outrageous. They're things that should be simply accessed, easily done, even if it's a program that we do from home. Not that we have time to invest in those programs at home, right? But even if it's just some kind of help to help out. So yeah, definitely access to services, access to respite. There's a couple of other things, I guess, but as a paid carer, I would probably, or as a working carer paid outside the home, I would probably say like flexibility. I would say like every appointment that we go to is a daytime appointment. We've got to take time off of work. We've got to either make that time up ourselves or lose our holidays. I think the first couple of years David was born of like my annual holiday allocation, which was like 25 holidays a year. 5 of those were actually holidays. Right. So the others were all either appointments or like setting David up, filling out forms, all that kind of stuff. So yes, he was much younger back then, but even right now, the flexibility of being able to say, actually, I want that appointment over the phone, which was wonderful for COVID, right? So we had all these telephone consultations that were awesome. And I was like, okay, now we can do a telephone consultation and I don't have to drive like a 6-hour round trip to Dublin, squeeze David's creams and somehow his treatments and the whole lot. So that was brilliant. But definitely before COVID came along, that kind of flexibility and that kind of really patient-centered approach was probably one of the biggest challenges.
And I think, Lizzie, speaking to carers every day, particularly the issues of respite and access to therapies is a huge issue right across the country. So many carers would say that to us. In fact, so many carers end up having to pay privately or out of savings for therapies that should be provided publicly. But that is the case, unfortunately. Because otherwise they end up waiting 2-3 years. And in that time, the child or the person they're caring for can regress. So in terms of then, COVID has come to our shores and has obviously brought many challenges for everybody in society, but I think particularly for family carers. So could you talk a little bit about these from your family's perspective?
So yeah, for sure. COVID was a bit of a yin and a yang. The biggest challenge probably was the school closure for us. The school closure has meant that while myself and Ian are both trying to work from home, we're also trying to support David from home. So anything that an SNA would have done in school, anything that was facilitated or an additional support in school by the various systems that are there, now came down to both myself and Ian to do it. So just things like, helping David with homework, things like doing his daily routine that would have been done in school by his SNA, all came down to us. That meant that we would take 1 hour off a day each. So I would take either an hour off in the morning, Ian would take an hour off in the afternoon. We'd work with David, do what we needed to do, but we had to make up those hours elsewhere. Right. So we either have to get up earlier in the morning or we have to work later in the evening time. We are paid employees. We both have to do our work, even though, obviously companies have been fantastic throughout COVID. But at the end of the day, you still have to deliver your hours and you still have to do what you need to do. So that's definitely one of the challenges that happened with us when COVID when COVID came on board. The opposites of that, I would say, one of the benefits of the schools closing was that bit of flexibility that we had again, right? So, David gets up every morning at 6 o'clock. We get up at 6. David gets up at 6:30 every morning to start his morning routine, which is it's a pretty early start for a kid, not getting to bed until 10 or 11. It's hard to say to a teenager, oh, you need to be in bed at 9 o'clock so you can be up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and that's just how the years have progressed with us. But we had that little bit more flexibility. Online classes, meant that he could access every class. When David is in school, he misses out on a class a day in order to deliver his routine. He doesn't have resource hours to make up those classes. So as a student, a Leaving Cert student, attempting a regular Leaving Cert course or content, he misses a class every day and he's expected to catch up on those. So 5 classes a week, and he doesn't have resource hours to support them. So for David, having access to all online classes, not missing classes, all that kind of stuff, it was just, it was the flexibility that COVID brought to us. Yes, other people didn't like it, but for us, it totally worked.
Okay. So then tell me a little bit about your employers. So I know EA Gaming have been very supportive to you, and I know you really appreciate that. Are there any initiatives in particular that they have introduced that you feel have made your life a little easier? And maybe if other employers were to introduce it into their company, it might make the lives of carers who are juggling paid care with care in the home a little bit easier.
Yeah, definitely. So EA Ireland have, I guess, as part of a much wider global company, EA Ireland introduced a number of different initiatives during the pandemic. So they have, a leave called pandemic care leave. And that was to allow people to take time out to care for people who are sick, like relatives who are sick, kids who were not in school, and schools were closed down. And they had a very specific criteria that had to be met, albeit, they were very relevant criteria at the time. And that was a fantastic initiative to have. So again, not taking your own annual leave, not being expected to use your own time. And I think that was one of the things that really helped us out from a school perspective. So I used to take those when the school days were out, or in order to support David, like I was talking about earlier. So that was a huge thing. I'm sure many other companies did the same thing. I've heard a lot, just as part of my role, I do a lot of research, and I've heard a lot of companies kind of doing that kind of stuff. The other thing I would say is that we actually have a number of different ERGs and support groups. So employee resource groups or support groups that help each other out, or help the members of those ERGs to deal with day-to-day challenges. So we've got ERGs around LGBTQ, we've got SOMUS ERGs, we've got an ABLE ERG, which is all about accessibility, and it's all about helping people understand the accessibility needs of others and the mental well-being of others. And so they are a huge resource. As part of those, EA Ireland and Galway actually formed the relationship with Family Carers Ireland, and they provided a space for family carers to come together, get to know each other within our site in Galway, and support each other better through guided conversations with Suzanne and just general facilitation. How is it going? What could be done better, etc. So that was a fantastic opportunity. It helped me to get to know others on site who are also carers, and it really formed a bond with us in terms of, how can we help each other out? How can we, what are we doing? What am I doing that might help somebody else? And do I have information that might help somebody else? A lot of our staff in Galway are for European staff, because it's a language centre. So just being able to talk to them about how things work here and what kind of things we do and how we access them was a fantastic opportunity. And that was all facilitated by Family Carers Ireland.
Excellent. And I know that programme, our Caring Employers programme, has been really well received across other organisations as well. And as you said, it's about peer support as much as anything. So knowing that there are other employees in the same position maybe as you. They're juggling paid care with paid work with care in the home. But I think also the fact that, you know, there are information sessions on things like what are your rights and entitlements, if somebody needs to know about fair deal, or if somebody has a query. So it's nice to know that there is an organisation like Family Carers Ireland, like ourselves, there to help and support them. Do you think in your own caring role, or your caring role, has had an impact on your opportunities for promotion, not just in your current employment, but over the years? Do you think it impacts on that?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think it all comes down to an individual and kind of their work ethic and what that looks like. So, and I mean that because I know that I'm an extremely hard worker. I know that that's been kind of driven into me since we were kids. My parents had their own business. You know, it was hard work when you were self-employed and raising 5 kids, and it was hard work that got them there. And I never take for granted any position that I have, right? At the end of the day, you shouldn't be indispensable to any company. So I think not the restrictions it's put on me, but the challenge it's put on me is working hard, working diligently, kind of, and trying to get promotions, which I have been really successful with, but also trying to balance that with caring. And I think there's, you know, I love to work. I don't think I'll ever not be a worker. I love to work. Everybody has the choice whether they do or they don't. I chose to because I love working and I love what I do. But I think from a future perspective, I see promotions as being extra work, and that's purely because of my own traits and my own personality. And that's probably what stops me from thinking that I'll go further. So I think I'm probably at a limit now of I'm at a senior manager kind of director level right now. And I don't think I would go further than that because I just see it as a lot more hard work, a lot extra work. And I just don't know if I have the brain power to be able to juggle all of that and manage David as well, especially at the stage where he's at, where we're looking at leaving cert, we're looking at college. I want to be available to support him, and I don't think I can balance that healthily with furthering my career any further.
Okay, that's a really good answer. And I think from an employer's perspective, I think they would be very lucky to have somebody like you and like so many carers, because you're so capable in terms of juggling so many balls in the air at one time. As you said, very diligent, well able to prioritize. Yeah. Probably have to fight and battle for everything in your home life in terms of your caring role. So that type of a person and that commitment and that passion, any employer would be very lucky to have somebody like that, you know, in their employment. So family carers are, you know, a very unusual, a unique breed almost in terms of their capabilities and their capacity and their competency. So I think any employer will be lucky to have you and many others as well.
Yeah, Catherine, if you don't mind, I'll just add to that. I think that's a great point, because I do firmly believe in a future of work and in a future work model that family carers will be able to access work remotely, from home, flexible hours. I think there's an amazing skill set. Like you said, we plan, we understand the complexity of things. We can break things down into, really complex problems into simple solutions, and we actually get stuff done, right? Because we have no choice in that. We get stuff done for the people that we care for every day. And I think we can translate that into a professional environment. So I really think the future of work around remote working, around flexible hours, just delivering what you need to deliver whenever you do it. I think that is a huge opportunity for family carers if they want to access the workforce.
Yeah. And I do think we need to look at how we can make that easier. And that may be looking at things like social protection payments, extending the hours that family carers can work outside the home, so there's so many things that could be there to make that easier, which would benefit the family carers themselves, but definitely benefit employers. Yeah. There's no doubt about it. We know there are over 250,000 family carers right across Ireland juggling care in the home with paid employment. Do you think there is an awareness out there amongst employers that a percentage of their employees are juggling care in the home whilst working with them? And if not, or if you, do you think, how might we raise that awareness better? Because we know some employers don't know that there are caring employers in their midst, basically.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I think employers, I think COVID has brought a huge awareness of caring to employers. I think, definitely in the last couple of years, there's a lot of focus on doing what you can, caring for family first, right? I definitely think that what we used to call the employee experience is switching more towards a human experience right now. So I think employers are starting to understand families come first, relatives, elder relatives, especially looking after parents, etc. That's a huge discussion topic right now following the pandemic, and how companies continue to support that. I will say that from a gender perspective, I think women typically are adopting the caring roles, right? And I'm sure you have statistics around, the gender balance or the gender imbalance that there is in caring. And not because it's intended by any family members, I'm sure it's just the way it works out, right? I know we're in a very rare situation where I worked for a lot of years and Ian took carers leave, and that doesn't happen very often. But I do think that employers need to be very cognizant of the fact that a lot of these carers may be females. A lot of these carers who are females also come with, I don't want to stir the pot. I don't want to be the woman shouting up. I don't want to be, in a team with a lot of male counterparts. I don't want to be always the person who's creating the noise around us. And I think from that perspective, that's where the peer support comes in. I think that's where the support groups comes in. A lot of companies have got a wide variety of those support groups. And I think carers, I think that can equally feature alongside any of the others that are there right now. There's also a wide element of, I won't say confidentiality, but a reluctance to share about your caring role, right? I know when you invited me to do this podcast at the time, there was a recruitment agency in touch with me about a different role, about, interviewing for a new role. And one of my biggest questions was like, do I tell them or don't I tell them? What do I go in and say in an interview? And I like to be really open about my situation, but, am I going to go into an interview and say, yeah, sure, I can take this role, but I want to do it remote, and I want to do it remote because I want to be there for my son and I need extra days off, and some of those might be short notice and all this kind of stuff, right? And I would never go into a role where I would actually have to retrospectively do that. I think that's really unfair in an employer. But trying to understand when is the right time to share it with the future employer is definitely a big question. It's a big challenge for a lot of women is, how are they perceived if they tell people that they are a carer?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And, I think 1 in 9 people are providing care in the home in this country today. And by 2030, that'll be 1 in 5. And actually 1 in 8 people in employment are actually family carers juggling care in the home with work. So this is a huge percentage of people in the workplace. But I don't think there is that awareness there. And I think there may slightly be a stigma as well. And as you said, family carers might be reluctant to say it at the very beginning, maybe, or as you said, in an interview situation, for fear that maybe it could go against them. In terms of the male-female breakdown, in census 2011, it was 80% female carers and 20% male, but it actually moved to 60% female, 40% male by 2016. Wow. Now, it will be interesting to see what the new census shows up, and hopefully more carers will have ticked question 23 on that census form to say that they are providing that care. But it is, there's no doubt about it, the majority of carers would be female. As you said, that sometimes goes back to cultural issues, but also we can find as well that where there might be a female in a home, maybe who hasn't married, they tend to then be the one left almost to pick up that caring role. So we do need to look at this and see it can be male, it can be female, whoever is providing that care. The most important thing to us is that they're not doing it on their own. They shouldn't have to do it alone. They should have supports, and whether that's supports in terms of financial support, but also supports from their employers as well. But in order for employers to support carers, they have to know that they're in their midst, and they have to know, what their caring roles are. So it is an awareness issue. It is probably looking at removing that stigma almost as well from carers being able to say it to their employer. And I think the benefits of taking on a family carer far outweigh what might be some of the flexibility or some of the arrangements that might be required to make their working as positive for the employer and the employee as possible. So then this is your last question. You'll be glad to know. So if employers were to do 3 things to support family carers like yourself, what would these be?
Oh, I'm going to say, I think, so 3 things, I think one is definitely flexibility. So, and I think there's no reason why the flexibility that was delivered for COVID can't be maintained. Mm-hmm. Right. So we have done it for 2 years now. We've proved that it's possible. So I don't think there's any reason why an employer, I think there's minimal reasons. I won't say there's any reason, but I think there's minimal reasons why employers can't maintain that flexibility. I think the second thing is to make it okay, to make it acceptable, to champion carers in the workplace. They don't want extra recognition, right? They just want to be treated like everybody else. But an acute awareness from managers, from leaders, from HR about, what they're dealing with outside of home, and how they're balancing their work with that, making sure that there's support in place if they need it. So I think just that awareness from an employer perspective. The third thing I would say is being open to hiring family carers. I think it does require a shift for a lot of companies in terms of how they operate. So it could be a lot of part-time work, it could be temporary work, it could be flexible work, what we call asynchronous work. So you don't have to be available when everybody else is available, but you can still get a job done. I just think that employers recognizing the skill set, the opportunity that us as a group in family carers can bring to them, and the positivity that we can bring to the table for them, I think that's huge. And I think for me, that really is all about campaigning, whether it's Family Carers Ireland or other like organizations campaigning with employers and making sure that the skill set and the passion and the effort that we can deliver for them is recognized, and that employers can then shift their working models and their operating models accordingly to facilitate employing family carers.
Fabulous answers, thanks. And I think I could almost add to that by saying, you're right, organizations like ourselves, Family Carers Ireland, if we can work with employers, raising awareness, about who their caring employers are, but also we go in and we support the employer to support the carers so that the employer doesn't have to pick up that work. We'll do it for them. So we will do those sessions, that training, that information. We'll run those peer support groups as well. So it is very much, we take on that burden, if you want to call it, so that the employer doesn't have to do that themselves. So Family Carers are definitely here to help any employers that would like to chat to us or engage with us around the Caring Employers Project. So thank you so much, Lizzie, for joining me today. It's been really informative and I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Likewise, Catherine, it's been great to chat with you as always. And I hope that the future of working carers is bright and positive for everybody.
We've reached the end of our CAREWELL conversation for this episode. I'd like to thank you for listening. If you'd like to hear more from us, please subscribe to CAREWELL Conversations on your podcast platform of choice, or alternatively, you will find us at carewellproject.com or across our various social media channels, which are linked in our podcast feed. We'd also like to hear from you, our listeners. Please feel free to leave any comments, feedback or suggestions you may have on any of our social media feeds, or you can contact us directly at carewell@ucd.ie. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to you joining us on future CAREWELL Conversations.